Uh, so that was nice. No silly introduction this time. Um, I think it was Maher did Walking with the King, which reminded me of two stories about walking with the king. And since the general theme tonight is going to be traveling with Baba, that seems to fit. So we talked before about Baba's humor and how Baba appreciated little things. And his sister, Mani, also is very much like that. And like Baba, many of you may not know this, but Baba was a great mimic. And Mani was a great mimic. And Mani used to entertain the other women by imitating various ones of the women mandali. And I don't remember now whether it was Carmen Masi or Suna Masi, but one of the older women was large and apparently had a somewhat of an interesting waddle walk. And Mani, of course, could imitate this perfectly, and it cracked everybody up. And so much so, they wanted Mani to do it for Baba. So Baba arranged for, we'll say Sunamasi, I don't remember which one, to go do guard duty and sit outside the compound to make sure that no men entered the compound. And then Mani did her little imitation, and everybody found it hilarious, except for Mansari. Now, Mansari was very traditional. And in traditional Indian culture, no matter who it is, you show respect for someone who's older than you. And Mani at this point was like 15 or something, and Sunamasi already has a child, so Sunamasi's probably in her 40s or 50s. So Mansari found this very distasteful. And she said, but I was so happy that when Baba let Mani do it, let everybody laugh, and then he went out and took Sunamasi by the arm, and he walked back with her. And he gave her that respect. And Mansari said that made her so happy. Which reminds me of another story of Dun. Now, Dun was, I won't go into family relations. Let's just say she had muscular dystrophy from a family that was very close to Baba. And she lived in Pune with the Jesawala family. And so Baba decided one time in Pune he wanted to go see a movie. And he said to Dun, I want you to come with me. And Dun said, no, Baba, I'll just be a burden, because Dun's muscular dystrophy got progressively worse. And back then, she could still walk, but with great difficulty. And Baba, of course, always wanted everything done very quickly. And she said, no, Baba, I'll just slow you up. And Baba said, no, you don't have any choice in this. I'm telling you to come to the movies with me. So they go to the movies, and the car arrives, and Dun is very slow getting out of the car because she's mostly crippled. So she's slowly getting out of the car, and Papa Jesawala, who Baba nicknamed Pistol because of his temper, starts yelling at Dun. What are you doing? You're taking so long. You're holding Baba up. And Baba tells him, be quiet. And he takes Dun by the arm, and very slowly they walk to the movie theater. And Dun said after that, the song, I Walk with the King, was always one of her favorites. So I was thinking, well, Baba did a lot of traveling. And in our own way, we're traveling, hopefully with Baba and to Baba. And I don't have very many prosums about traveling, but I do have this. Again, last night, I could not sleep. There was a strange restlessness carried into my room by the night breeze. Where had it come from? This wind, scented with a tang of ocean spray. From what shore, in what land did it beckon me? As I gaze out at the moon-bleached landscape, the stars slip across the sky as if I'm adrift. Already, I seem to feel the roll of the ocean swell beneath my feet. I have no idea where I'm headed, but my soul cries out an ancient shout of seafaring. So Baba, as you know, said on this journey there are 3 stages. We're not talking about planes or anything mystical like that, but 3 stages that we could know about. And the first is that great enthusiasm and exhilaration when you first find out about Baba. And life is good in so many ways. It has meaning. Baba's wonder. Everything's exciting. And if you're like me way back then, oh, I'm going to be realized, in a few weeks. I'm going to make it up the plains and this and that. It's a time of great excitement. Baba says that phase doesn't last very long. The second phase, unfortunately, is very long. And that's one where all that enthusiasm fades away. And life is just a long, slow slog. And that's most of our life, most of our incarnations, if we're involution at least, is that long, slow slog where there's no enthusiasm and life is very tedious. And the third phase, of course, is realization. But that's instantaneous and there's nothing really to talk about. So it's the second phase. And the mandali were not immune to this, especially in the early years. And they would feel, if you read, you find out that in the early years, Baba tempted a lot of the very early mandali with realization, or at least spiritual experiences. And he kept promising them that they would get this. And it took some of them sooner than others, but after a couple years, they realized it's not happening. And at that point, they didn't really care, because being with Baba was what they wanted. But in that phase where they realized it's not happening, in fact, they tell a story. I heard this story from both Adi and Erich. Each told it as if it was the one happening to them. So I don't know, maybe it did. Maybe it happened to someone else and they appropriated it. But it's that people would come to see Baba. And then if they saw the mandali, they say, oh, you people, you're so blessed. We just had a few minutes in Baba's presence and we're so uplifted. We gained so much by just seeing him. We can't imagine what you've gained by living with him day and night all these years. And this was a problem for them because they thought, we haven't gained anything. But if we tell people, no, it's just ordinary life, that it's going to be letting Baba down because they think Baba's someone really, how can we say, yeah, we've been with him, but we've gained absolutely nothing. So they finally go to Baba with this problem. And Baba says, well, of course you couldn't answer that question. That's a bad question. You can't give a good answer to a bad question. The question shouldn't be, what have you gained? The question should be, what have you lost? And if they had asked that, you could have had a long list of things you've lost. So Erich said that in one of those times when enthusiasm lagged, and as a side note, that we won't get into this, it's too long a story, but basically the mandali's perspective was, for the most part, they dealt with Erich as a human. And Baba treated them not as nice as most humans would, but as a cranky old uncle might, very demanding, never satisfied, always complaining. But then when people came to see Baba, Mani said they loved darshan programs because it's like Baba opened the spigot of his love, and the love just flowed out. So they loved that aspect of darshan programs, but they didn't get to experience that much. And Erich said, what is this, Baba? All we get is this, and they come and they get so much? And Baba Beg said, this is your lot, that you experience my humanity, and they get to experience my divinity. But the day will come when they will hunger for my humanity, and you will experience my divinity. And the mandali said after Baba dropped his body, when inexplicably people started coming who knew nothing about, just heard his name, they said, well, why is that? Only God could be doing that. Only God could be bringing everybody to him. So they were starting to experience Baba's divinity that way. And when the young Westerners came, what did they want? What was Baba like? What was his favorite toothpaste? Did he fart? Did he laugh? All these human things. And oh yeah, Baba said they would hunger for my humanity, and you will experience my divinity. But before that, they were going through what they call a stale period, where life was just very hard. And Erich would always say Baba would notice these things, not as God, but because he was so perceptive as a man. And he would notice that the pep in the step was, they still obeyed Baba, they did everything he wanted, but there wasn't quite that enthusiasm. And so Baba would say, what's up with all of you? And by now, all of you know the proper answer anytime the avatar asks you anything like that. And the answer is, nothing, Baba. Nothing, Baba. But no, what is it? And then Baba said, okay. He said, let me tell you a story. So this is a story Baba told the mandali. And it's a story about another master. And Baba's kind of using this other master as a stand-in for himself. He said, there was a master once. And his mandali were wonderful. They did everything he asked them of him. He asked of them. But after a while, he noticed that their enthusiasm seemed to be waning. So the master said to them, what's up? And they all said, nothing. He said, I've been thinking. You've been with me how long? And they would say how many decades they've been with him. He said, in all this time, you've never had a vacation. Why don't we have a vacation? They think, what does that mean? Oh, yeah, okay, we'll have a vacation. And he said, no, I mean it. Let's have a vacation. And he said, what does that mean exactly? And he said, well, no work. Forget correspondence, forget laundry, forget all the little tasks I make you do. We'll just have vacation. Well, okay, that's good. And what, we'll just sit around here all day? He said, no, that's not a vacation. Let's have a picnic, a real picnic. And so someone like Gunny said, what, rice and dal? That's a picnic? He said, no, you can have as much meat as you want. You be in charge. The Gunny type person, you be in charge of the food. Get kebabs, get cutlets, get keema, whatever you want, you're in charge. So Gunny picks up at that. I'm going to use the mandali's name rather. And that sounds pretty good. But then he knows Baba. And thinks, yeah, Baba, and you're giving me what, 4 rupees as a budget? No. I'm telling Kaka to open the purse. Whatever you need, ask him, and I authorize the expenditure. Well, now that's starting to sound pretty good. So emboldened, Adi says, yeah, but Baba, don't we have anything to drink for that? Baba said, of course. Like what, Baba? Whatever you want. Wine, spirits. You mean brandy, whiskey, scotch, Johnny Walker? Whatever you want. Again, unlimited budget. So now they're starting to take this, this sounds pretty good. And so someone else says, but what are you going to do? And he says, why don't we rent a launch, a long boat, and we'll go down the river, and we'll get music and records, and we'll have wine and food, and we'll just go down the river and have a great time. And now they all think, yeah, this is sounding good. But then think, yeah, this is like Baba breaking his silence. It's never going to happen. When's this going to happen? He says, well, get me a calendar. And they get a calendar. And he says, let's do it on a full moon night. That'll make it really romantic. And so they look and they see where the full moon is on the calendar. He says, that will be the day we're going. And so now everybody's pretty happy about it. But then after that, it's just back to the normal routine. And after a day or two, they kind of forget about it because Baba's Baba, and they know it's not going to happen. And but Baba himself keeps bringing it back up. Don't forget. How many more days? Only 7? Did you get the food yet? No, I'm working on. How about the wine? Yes, Baba, I've got a cousin he's not in a dry state. We'll get this. And so he's getting them excited. And finally the day comes. And everything is as he promised. They can sleep as late as they want. They don't have any chores. And then they pack up all the hampers with the food, and they go down to the river, and they get on the launch, and they unpack, and they have a huge lunch. And it's starting to get dark now. It's getting dusk, and this is perfect. And they get out the crank gramophone, and Adi gets his sitar, because Adi is a good sitar player, and they start to sing. And now Adi motions to somebody, and they get out the spirits, and they each have a little cup of something, and they're having a grand time. And they spend the whole night floating down the river under the full moon. Just a wonderful time. Until, the morning comes, and they've been up all night long, but they're not even that tired because it's been such a great party. And they say, okay, the master says, it's time to go back now. And we'll have to go back to and then there's a commotion. And the master says, what's up? And it turns out when they go to the boat, they find out they've never unmoored themselves. They had never gone down the river at all. It was all just an imagination. I mean, you see the stars, you think you're moving, but they had never untied the boat. And then Baba says, and that's your problem. You've left everything to be with me. There is no doubt about that. But you haven't completely unmoored yourself from the world. And Eric said, when Baba said that, I had to realize it's true. I left everything to be with him, but I haven't unmoored myself. It's not 100% surrender. I still have attachments. And that's why we don't experience the joy of being with Baba that we should. So that was a little story Baba told to kind of pick them up a little bit about traveling. So I've been using kind of river metaphors and ocean metaphors, but most of Baba's traveling, although I don't know how many times, some scholar here can tell us how many times Baba crossed the ocean on an ocean liner. But the majority of Baba's traveling in India was on trains. Baba traveled thousands and thousands of miles on trains. And as Eric said, we always traveled on trains, but we traveled the most when you were supposed to travel the least. So we traveled in the 40s during World War II. And all the signs in the stations were, travel only when you must. But Baba wanted to hunt must, so he must travel then. And they also continued to travel quite a bit through partition. And Neeraj said it was just hellish, because back in partition time, there was no respect for any living being. If, a Muslim came on a train compartment that was filled with Hindus, he could be slaughtered on the spot. Just no respect. And everywhere you went, there were dead bodies piled up. He said, and this is when we were traveling. So one time they were traveling with Baba, and they happened to get a bogie very near the train engine. And apparently that's not a desirable bogie. I don't know why, maybe because of the smoke coming in from the engine, or it bounces more. But so they would pull into a station. Now, some of you may have had experience with Indian travel. And back then it was even worse than it was when you traveled. And Baba usually traveled third class, which meant there were no reserved seats. And a bogie that maybe was supposed to hold 12 could have 30, 40, no limit to the number of people that would cram in there. And as soon as the bogie pulled in the station, even if it had 25 people in there, another 10 would try and get in. And it was an interesting thing that when someone tried to get in there, it said, you fought them tooth and nail to keep them out. But once they managed to get in, then they were on your side. And then you were all friends keeping the other people out. So at one point, the exhausting must travel, as always. They travel for days and nights without sleep, without food. And they were exhausted. But Baba would be exhilarated if they found a must, a good must. And you could tell from the way he walked like a king. It was triumphant in battle. Baba was so happy when he contacted a must. And nothing mattered for Baba. If he didn't want to eat, didn't want to sleep, just concentrating. But they were all exhausted, so they were coming back. And they had a bogie right behind the engine, so they were enjoying the fact that it wasn't crowded. And they would come into a station, and people just crowd in, but they would get the bogies at the back of the train first. But they would notice that at each station, the crowd was coming closer and closer to the beginning bogie, and they knew it wouldn't be long before they'd be inundated. So they come to the next station, and they know at this point it's their turn. And Baba says, okay, tell you what. And he lies down, and he puts a sheet over himself, and he pretends to be a corpse. And they all sit there very solemnly. And as Eric said, there was no respect for the living, but for some strange reason, people respected the dead. So when people came and they'd start to enter the compartment, and they'd say, oh, these grieving family members for a dead person in their family, and they turn away and walk back. And the train would pull out, and Bob would take the sheet off his head. Pretty good trick, huh? As I said, Eric said that although they loved being with Baba, but traveling was always a time of great tension. He said, we were strong. Eric was so strong, the other mandali nicknamed him Bhima, from the Mahabharata, one of the 5 Pandavas, who was as strong as how many elephants?
It was Bhima.
What?
100 elephants.
100 elephants.
300 elephants.
300. Do I hear 4? The point is very strong. And so Eric said, I was young. He was in his 20s. I was strong. The crowds didn't bother me. But the tension was they had to protect Baba's body. And with those crowds, it was very hard to see that Baba didn't get jostled. And what they tended to do is that he and Bidal was another very strong person. And they would fight their way through the crowds, protecting Baba as best they could. And one of them would get onto the train and then lean out the window, and they would hoist Baba up through the window. This is before the bars were put on the train windows. And they put Baba up, and then Baba could get inside the train and be relatively safe. And then they would worry about getting all the luggage and everything in. But of course, if they weren't traveling with women, life was so much easier. They didn't have tons and tons of luggage, so they didn't need much. And they would get, and so, when the train first put, those first few moments until they got Baba safely settled, it was incredibly tense. One time, and we'll see this later on, you're going to go on a train ride with Baba later on. We'll give it another few minutes. We're going to take a train trip, and you'll see just how chaotic it was. But so one time, I say this was during the war, and Baba's about to go off, probably on a must hunt, and Erich and Baba had stopped at the family home in Bindra House. And Guy, my sister, Banu, some of you may have met Banu Masi, gives them a huge tin of cookies. And Erich's reaction is, another thing for me to carry? I've got Baba's satchel, I've got his water and his extra chapels and an alphabet board. And they had to carry little bowls in case they met someone to put water in so Baba could wash their feet in the towels. They had lots of things they had to do for must work. And I don't want to have just another thing to carry. And Baba says, be quiet, just take the cookies. So they take the cookies, and they get on a train, and they actually got inside, and it's mostly filled with military people. And that's okay. They don't mind. They're happy. They're in the military thing. But they pull in, and another battalion is now getting on the train. So the first battalion doesn't want them to come in. And so there's a scuffle. But they force themselves in. But the scuffle continues. And it starts to turn into a full-fledged riot. And they had guns with bayonets. This was really looking scary. And it looked like they were going to start murdering each other, because it had really come to fisticuffs. And he said, all of a sudden, Baba stood on one of the benches, and he gave, one of those electric claps, and everybody just stops. And Baba gives them a lecture. He says, what is this? You're fighting for Mother India. You're all brothers. What are you doing fighting amongst yourselves? And gives them a lecture, how they should all be brothers. And then Baba says, at the next station, I will provide tea for everybody. And of course, that puts people in a good mood. And so they go into the next station. And not only do they get tea, but Baba says, get the cookies. And and he opens up the tin, and they each get a cookie. And these two groups, whatever they were, two army groups, had been such enemies. Now they're, arms around each other. They're singing patriotic ballads together and having a great time. So that was the time when Baba quelled a riot just by clapping his hands. So I tell you what, I'm talking about how difficult. Let's actually go on one of those train journeys now, just because everybody, I can see they've got their props. So, as I said earlier, Baba at one point was making the Universal Center in Bangalore. And they had an opening ceremony. They broke ground. They had a special spade made of 7 different minerals or something to break the ground. They had a little stool to sit on I don't know, it's an elaborate thing. And of course, as soon as they did this, Baba abandoned the whole plan. And that was it. No more Baramangala, no more Bangalore. But meanwhile, everyone had come to Bangalore to stay. And Baba said, now enough of this, let's go back to Mehrabad. So typically Baba and the women, the invisibles as Duncan called them because they never saw them, got to go by car. But most of the mandali and the must and the mad and all the furniture and all the cooking equipment and all the animals went on the train. So they come to the train station, and just to give you some idea of just what it was like, it was so noisy because you get to the train platform and trains are coming in. And trains are leaving. There are vendors on the platform hawking their wares.
Garam chai, garam chai. Lead, lead, lead. Vada, vada.
Yeah, I get him.
Telugu as well, because that's what they speak, in Bangalore. And you also had the announcements about the trains in the station.
Okato number train vastandi.
I thought we had a few other announcements, but I guess not. So, and you had the noise of the passengers as well. All sorts of noises. Go ahead.
Oh, John, the filth, the stench. I can't bear it anymore.
Buck up, old girl. Soon we'll be at the first class, and that will be clean and quiet.
So, as Eric said, Baba wasn't with them. They were used to this. It was a piece of cake. They could just make their way through the crowd. And Donkin wrote this up. He describes this. And he said that in those days, you could reserve a compartment just for a big party and had its own cooking facilities and everything. And Chanji, who was a wizard at all these travel arrangements, had gotten such a bogey. So they get in the bogey, and Donkin says the journey was an episode in itself. For so weird an assortment of oddities can seldom have graced the hard slatted seats of such a bogey, or indeed of any bogey, on this or any railway, then or since. Because not only did all the mandali come on, they had 20 madmen. They had 6 musts. They had a gazelle. They had a peacock. A sheep. A white rabbit. Some geese. Come on, people can. 5 dogs. 3 monkeys. 2 pet birds. All crammed into this one compartment. And they sat cheek by jowl with tin trunks, packing cases, tables, chairs, and the inevitable medley of domestic and culinary equipment. And so after a while, the train pulls out. And the station noise, all the station people, at once, all the station noises diminishes as they pull away from the station. But that doesn't mean, of course, that it's quiet, because we have all those animal noises. And as soon as the train started to pull out, one of the musts tied bells around his ankles and started to dance. Well, the other must beat out a rhythm on a kerosene tin. And as they danced, they made Erich and Beidel get up and dance with them. And Donkin said, as I told you, when you pull into the next station, everybody tries to get into your... And Donkin said, people would rush to the door when the train pulled in, and they take one look inside, and they turn around, and they never entered the compartment. So that was one of Baba's train travels. There was one time they were traveling on the train, and they were sitting there, and they were going through Gujarat. And Gujarat, at that time, it's funny, even though there's a strong Parsi community in Gujarat, this was, after independence, and there was a strong anti-Parsi feeling in India, because a lot of people felt that the Parsis had been collaborators with the British. So they had this grudge. Oh, yeah, they were getting all the jobs with the British because, they weren't being true to India and so on. And so they were going through Gujarat, which was also a strong hold of the Congress Party. So there was anti-Parsi feeling there. And they're on the train, and as you know, well, maybe you don't know, but on Indian trains, you can get on from either side because you don't know which side's going to be next to the platform. But it's kind of accepted custom, unspoken rule, that when the train pulls in, you get in from the platform side. You don't get in from the track side. So Beidel is sitting at a seat near the door on the track side, and somebody comes on the train from that side. And this outrages Beidel's sensibilities of train etiquette. And he rudely tells the guy to get off. And Erich even admits that, well, maybe there was a bit of a push there. And so, and then slams the door. A little bit later, this fellow comes on in a spotless white kurta. Turns out he's the mayor of the town, and he's the one that Beidel had pushed out. And he's come on, and he's flanked by policemen. And he says, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot an important point. Before this happened, Baba says to Beidel, you and Erich changed places. No explanation. So Erich just thought, well, maybe something's going to happen, and Beidel doesn't know Gujarati, I speak Gujarati. Who knows? Or maybe it's just a whim Baba has. You don't question it. Baba says it, you just do it. But then we have this, the mayor come on, and he points to Erich. And he says, that's the one who pushed me. Arrest him. And so then the mayor departs, and the police are there to arrest them. And so the police start questioning people. And everyone in the compartment swears they saw Erich push the mayor off the train. And the train starts to move, and the police are there taking statements from everybody. And finally they say to Erich, did you do this? Why did you do this? And Erich said, well, let me ask you something. He said, at the station, it had been raining very hard, hadn't it? They said, yes, it had been raining for days. And he said, the ground was completely muddy. He said, yes. So if I had pushed the mayor off the train into the mud, wouldn't there have been some mud on his clothes? You saw how spotless his kurta was? He couldn't have been pushed in the mud. And the policeman doesn't say anything because he knows Erich is right. But you don't admit if you're a policeman that, you've made a mistake. They continue questioning everyone in the compartment, but never any of the mandali. And when they came to the next station, come on, let's hurry. And they all got off the train, and it's never a problem. One time, when they were on the train, they were very lucky because for some reason it wasn't crowded, the compartment they were in. But there was a politician, probably congressperson at that point, I don't know, who was in the compartment with them. So Erich, being very polite, says, excuse me, sir, as you see, we're traveling together, it's a small group, we really would appreciate it. The train isn't that full, why don't you go use another bogie and let us have our privacy here? Who do you think you are to tell me to get off? He said, no, I'm not telling you to get off. There's lots of room. If you have luggage, we'll help you carry your luggage. You'll be very comfortable, but it just lets us have a little time together. It's been an exhausting journey. He refuses to do it. So Baba gives the men a little signal. And from that point on, they stop talking, and they just start gesturing to each other. And they start having a conversation in gestures. And, Erich does this, and Pendu starts laughing like crazy, and then and Gustaji use gestures anyway. And the are they crazy? He said, excuse me, what's happened? And they won't talk to him, they just turn away, and they continue. And when they get to the next station, he hurriedly gets down and goes to the next one. Train story, some of you may know. Well, actually, you may know all these stories, but I told you on Friday night, that's the way it goes. That they were traveling on a train, and again, this one was very crowded. And so crowded, there was no room for anybody. And they're on the train, they got on, and as they're on the train, they notice an old man with a little boy coming down the platform. And he's asking people, for Allah's sake, take my boy in, give him a seat. And nobody's doing anything. So he gets down to Baba's compartment. He says, please, someone, take in my son. Take in my son. He needs a seat. And nobody, of course, is willing to do that. he says, for Allah's sake. And as soon as he says that, Baba says to Erich, get the boy in. So Erich leans out, very strong, picks the boy up and pulls him in. And there's an immediate uproar in the bogie. What are you doing? There's no room for him. It's already crowded. And you say, be quiet. It's none of your business. I'll make room for him and he'll sit here. So Erich makes a little room and he sits next to Baba. And so they go along, and again, once the train starts, you're friends now. You don't hold any animosity. So they're going along. But at every station, the old man would come down to see if the son's okay. Is he doing okay? Is he okay? And finally, Erich says to him, this isn't good. Because some stations you don't stay very long and he could lose his place entirely on the train. And then what's going to happen? So he says to him, get the old man in. And so Erich knows this is going to be a problem. So at the next station, he leans out and he says to the old man, okay, don't say anything, but I'm going to pull you up as quickly as I can. And the old man agrees. So Erich goes, great strength, pulls him in, and the huge uproar in the bogie. What? Now what are you doing? Now what are you doing? But Baba had turned to leave a little more room, and Erich put the boy on his lap, and so there's room for the old man. And again, after they start leaving, settle down, everybody's friends, and they start talking. And the old man says, after thanking them profusely for taking the son in and letting him, and he says, where are you going? And so they tell him they're going to Gulbarga. And he says, why are you going there? And they were going on a must hunt. So Erich said, well, we're looking for, spiritual people. And they had different terms they would use because Bob was the only person in the universe who used must. That was a term he created. And so they'd say, we're looking for friends of God. We're looking for saintly people. They had different terms they would use. And he said, what? You're looking for saintly people? But, you look like Parsis. And they said, yeah. He said, why are you going to Gulbarga to look for saintly people? Don't you know that the most saintly person of all is Meher Baba, and he's a Parsi? Why are you going to other places? Where are you people from? And they said, Ahmednagar. He said, Ahmednagar? He said, I've wanted to take Baba's darshan so long, but every time I go, he's traveling somewhere. And you're going from Ahmednagar, where the root of all saintliness exists, and you're going after branches and leaves and twigs? What are you doing? And what can they say? They say, oh, yeah, well, we're going to Gulbarga, what to do? And so that's it. And they get to where they're going, and the old man, they come to a station, and the old man gets down with the boy, and they leave. And then Baba says to Erich, show him my photograph. Because they happened to have a copy of one of the magazines, Meher Gazette, or they had some literature with Baba's picture. To take him and show him and tell him he was sitting next to Meher Baba. So this is not a station where they're going to have a long stop. So Erich grabs it out of his bedding row and runs after him, and he's just about to get into a tonga. And Erich says, wait. What? He said, Meher Baba gave this to me to give to you, and he wants you to know that you were sitting next to him that whole time. He says, what? I was sitting there, and you didn't tell me? And he starts abusing Erich like anything. This younger generation, they're no damn good. And so he starts going back to the train. And Erich, of course, once Erich does Baba's work, that's it. It's done. You immediately turn and leave. And he hears the whistle. So he means the train's going to start up. So Erich is rushing back, and the old guy is following him as fast as he can. And Erich just rushes to get on the train. But as he gets to the bogie, he sees that Baba, who would travel incognito, which means often he had scarves wrapped around his head, or some kind of hat pulled down low. Sometimes he had dark glasses on. Baba's completely uncovered himself and is leaning out of the train, out of the window, so the old man has a good look at him. And Baba blesses him as he comes up. So that was a story Erich often told. And but then one time, Bal Natu said, that man comes for Amrutithi every year. I had never known that. That made me feel so good. That wasn't just this one-time thing, that he loved Baba and continued to love him for the rest of his life. So we have time for a couple more train stories. One time, I was telling Paul, sometimes you hear a story, but some of the details just strike you as you don't understand how this could be. And this is one of those stories. Because Baba and Erich were on a train, and there was an English memsahib, wife of a British, civil servant officer on the train. And what doesn't make sense to me is how could this be? Because she would never travel third class, and Baba almost never traveled first class. So I didn't understand how this could be. There was something called inner class, which was kind of in between classes, and maybe but whatever it is, this is a story Erich told, that they were on the train compartment, and there was an English woman there. Maybe not quite as snooty as the couple we heard in the Bangalore, but and she kept looking at Baba. And finally Baba said, "Is there something you want to ask?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "My husband gets posted to different parts of the country, and we're often way out of towns, just sort of in the jungle, and I'm terrified of snakes. And I was just wondering, is there any charm you can give me to keep snakes away?" And so, this may surprise you, Baba says, "Yes." And I don't remember it exactly, but I think the gist of it was she was supposed to take an egg and maybe blow out the egg and take the eggshell and burn it and crush it into a powder and put the powder into a locket and then wear the locket, and that would keep her safe from snakes. And Erich said, I often wondered that here this woman has that rare opportunity to be with the avatar, and she's attracted to him. She doesn't even know why. And what does she ask? "Do you have a charm for snakes?" But Erich would say, but that much was in her lot, that she should get to ask the avatar a question, no matter how silly. That much and no more. And that was an expression Erich would use a lot. And so one time they were traveling, and again, they had been traveling for days, and they had been fasting. And they pull into a station, and they get on the train, but it's hours before the train's going to pull out. So they're just sitting there, and Baba decides, let's break our fast and get something. But all the stalls are closed. It's too early in the morning. And as they're sitting on the train, suddenly they hear the clank, 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 clank of a stall being opened up. So Baba says, "Erich, go see what you can get." And so Erich goes, and it's a train stall, and he's got his little candies and whatever, and also some oranges and fruit. And there's a man in the stall, and he's opened up. So he's doing puja to a picture on the wall, a garland picture, which is fairly common. And there's a little boy now. And so Erich says, "How much for the oranges?" And so he quotes some price. And of course, being a good Indian, Erich says, "No, that's too much." And he starts to haggle with him. And finally, they reach some compromise. They get the oranges for a certain amount. And so Erich gives him the amount. And then he washes the oranges under a tap because they want it to be hygienic for Baba. And he comes back, and Baba's very pleased. And they're sitting there. And suddenly the owner of the shop comes. And what I didn't mention, which I'll mention now, is it wasn't just any picture of a saint or Ram or Krishna. It was a picture of Meher Baba that the man was worshipping. And he comes to the bogey, and he says, "Give me back my oranges." And he says, "What do you mean, your oranges? I bought them." He said, "No, you didn't. You stole them." He said, "No, I paid for them." He said, "But you didn't pay the right price. We have fixed price at my shop." And he said, "But I bargained. I didn't force your son to give them to me. Bargain fair." No, give them back. That's not the price. He should have known what the price was. And in India, first transaction of the day is most auspicious. So Erich said, "You don't want to go back on the first transaction." Yeah, nothing Erich said could persuade the guy. And he took the oranges back. And Erich says, "Baba, why didn't you tell him who you were? He was worshiping your picture. If you had said, 'I'm Meher Baba,' he would have given you the whole shop for free." I said, "No, that much was in his lot, that I should stand there while he's praying to me. That much and no more." We may have to move on to other types of travel. One last train one. Some of you may know this story too, but because the train travel was so hectic and it was so exhausting and difficult, that People like Mayurji and Nariman, who had money, kept begging Baba, Baba, please, let us get you a first class. There's no reason for you to travel third class. Let us get you first class. If not for you, at least for the mandali with you. And so Baba finally relents, and he lets them get him a first class compartment. A first class compartment with air conditioning. And they get on, and Eric's just thinking, oh my, after all these years, at last. But before the train even pulls out, Baba says, it's kind of chilly in here, don't you think? Go ask the engineer if he can turn the air conditioning so it's not so cold. So Eric runs off. The guy said, it's fixed. It's not a dial that you change, it's a fixed thing in the station, we can't change it. So Eric goes back, says, Baba, they can't change it. Oh, they have to keep it at this temperature? He says, yes, Baba. Ask him if he can turn it off. So Eric goes back and says, can you turn the air conditioning off? And the guy says, yeah. So they turn it off. But now, unlike an ordinary train, the windows are sealed. You can't open them. There's no ventilation at all. And Eric said he started to die. He'd never experienced such heat. Because they're traveling in the summertime, and when you're in a metal train, it just sort of absorbs the heat, and there's no air circulating at all. And Eric said, I felt like I was going to die. And what Eric did to get a little comfort is the Indian toilet is a hole in the ground. I mean, the 2 feet there that you squat on and a hole. I had to go in the bathroom and stick my head down the hole so I get a little breeze, just a little breeze, because I thought I was going to die. And he thought, okay, this is traveling with Baba. He said, I don't know what it was, but Baba didn't seem to like comfort. And if you gave him comfort, he would do his best to see that it was no longer comfortable. And along those lines, when they got back from one of these exhausting journeys, again, Mayurji and Nariman would try to make Baba's life easier, so they gave them a car. So when they got to Bombay, they could go in a car and go back to Ahmednagar in a car. But of course, that seems too easy. So Baba would be in the front seat, and there was a driver, because after 56, Eric lost his license, because after the accident, he lost his license because he had been the driver. And in fact, he had been charged with reckless driving. I don't know what lots of charges for having been the cause of the accident. And so for quite some time, he had to go to Y, which is the place where the courtroom was, and go to court to be charged. And finally, the judge decided, no, he wasn't at fault. It was an act of God. Yeah. So anyway, so Eric wasn't driving. So you have the driver and Eric, and then he said, we'd have like 4 or 5 of the mandali stuffed into the back seat. The back seat that could hold 3 people if they weren't very big, because Indian cars were small back then. And there'd be 5 of us crammed in there, and all of our luggage. And so we're in there. And of course, Baba, if he's in a car, doesn't want the windows open because he doesn't like a breeze. So it's still better than being in the train, but it's not exactly comfortable. And they're driving along, and Baba sees an old man walking on the road with a huge bundle. And Eric's heart sinks, because it's an old man with a long beard. And Baba had a soft spot for venerable old men, especially with beards. And he knows what's coming. And Baba, stop the car. Give him a ride. So Eric says, Baba, there's no room. Get him in the car. So Eric goes, would you like a ride, sir? And the man's very happy to get a ride. So they come to the car, and Eric gets out, and the man takes Eric's seat. But then there's this huge bag. What to do with it? They have no room at all. And so Eric at this point had lost his temper. So he just took the bag, and he just stuffed it in the back seat of everyone, and he slammed the door, and he storms off. Where are you going? I'm walking. I'd rather walk to Ahmednagar than to ride in that car. This is madness, Baba. And he said, so Baba said, basically, you're cracked. What are you doing? And Baba said, get in. And he said, Baba made room. Baba squeezed himself a little tighter and made room for Eric on the front seat. And Eric found that very touching, that not only did he let him express his annoyance and exasperation and storm off that I'm going to walk to Ahmednagar. But then coddled him to the point of sacrificing his own comfort so that he could have a little more room in the front seat. So that was one of their car travels. Whoops. One time, Erich is driving, but this was before the accident, so Erich is driving Baba. And as they're driving, there's vibration in the car. It's like the seat is shaking. What's happening? So Erich looks over, and Baba is laughing. And because Baba was laughing silently, it made his body shake even more, and so much so that the whole seat is vibrating. And Erich looks at, what's this? And Baba says, see that man? He says, no, what man? And so Baba has to describe what man. No, not that man, the man with the fez on. What? And anyway, oh, you mean that one with the black? Yes, that one. What about it? It was this huge procession of people on the road. They were going very slowly because it was an Urs, which is the festival of a saint's death day. And so the crowd is absolutely packed on the road, and they're just inching along, which is why they have time for Baba to point out there's someone in the crowd walking. And so he said, you see that man up ahead? And he said, yeah. He said, he used to be the saint in a past life, and now he's going to bow down in his own tomb. And so Baba found that very funny. So I was going to go through all the different conveyances Baba used. I don't think there's time for that, but we have to use at least one bus story because Baba traveled on buses so much. And so when they were traveling, and the blue bus was, again, one of those things that was designed for, I think, 16 people. I don't think it ever had less than 20, 22, sometimes as many as 30. The women were just packed in there. And I have a couple, we'll do another bus story tomorrow. We don't have time today. Remind me, the one about Baba's mother. But, so anyway, it's a hectic thing. Elaine Billow came to India in the later years after Baba, and I met her there. And she said, I could never figure out what Blue Bus tours were all about. I mean, Baba said we said we didn't do any sightseeing. And if we did, it was at nighttime when we couldn't see anything. If we went to a museum, we had to race through it as if this was some kind of, marathon contest. We couldn't stop and look at any. It was just madness. I mean, Baba did must work. But why did 30 of us have to come? The only thing that made sense to me, it was so impossible to be on the Blue Bus. It was a crash course in trying to live harmoniously. She could see no other point to it. So at one point, Baba took the bus and had it ferried across to Sri Lanka. And they're in a plantation, and then Baba decides to travel around Sri Lanka. So they all get in the bus and they're traveling along. And the women would have friction. Not so much the Eastern women amongst themselves, but the Western women and the Eastern women often didn't see things quite eye to eye. And occasionally they would have arguments. And they had two arguments that would flare up pretty often over hygiene. And one of them was that the Westerners were appalled that Indians clean dishes by scouring them with dirt. You take gravel and sand and dirt and you scour and you clean it that way. You're cleaning a vessel with dirt? They thought, no, that's crazy. And, no, that's okay. The Indian women thought it was maybe just as disgusting that the Western women, after they went to the bathroom, used toilet paper. You should use water and clean yourself with dirty cloth, and then what do you do with the cloth? So they would have arguments periodically about which was more hygienic, water or toilet paper. And Margaret Crass said at one point this argument got rather heated. And Nadine Tolstoy did not like confrontation and was a very sweet person. Nobody liked her, but she was a very sweet person. I don't know why nobody liked her. But at one point, Bob was talking about, this one doesn't get along with that one, and this one doesn't get along with that one. And nobody gets along with Nadine. She's so blessed because of that. But Nadine tries to, I think both are good. So trying to calm the waters. So that's the backdrop. They're traveling. And Margaret said they came to some little village in the middle of nowhere, and it had two outdoor toilets which means a little shed and a hole in the ground. And the stench, she said, was unbelievable. But all the women had to use it. So they all line up and they're using the toilets and things are going pretty well until it's Nadine's turn. And Nadine goes into the toilet and it seems to be taking her forever. And so the women start to grumble. What are you doing in there? You're not the only one. We all have to. Baba would always be in a hurry, so you have to go quickly. So when Baba says, let's go, you're ready to get on the bus. And they start grumbling and complaining, causing a big commotion. And Baba comes. What's all the trouble? So they start complaining vociferously to Baba about this selfish Nadine, how she's been in there so long. And as I said, Baba always took all complaints very seriously. She's using both. And that made the women laugh so much that all that animosity was gone. So we won't go into Baba on foot, Baba in canoes, and so on. So we'll just go, I'm going to read one last thing, and then again we'll have a moment of silence. We are selfish, spoiled, immature, and ill-behaved children. And yet, Baba's face lights up when he talks about us, and he refers to us as his gems. We fight constantly with each other, and we do terrible things to our siblings. And Baba only admonishes us occasionally and acts as if it's understood that kids will be kids. Most child-rearing experts agree that Baba is far too permissive. And some even accuse him of being an absentee parent, watching us from afar and letting us run amok without interference. But when Baba looks at you, not only do you know, despite your faults, that you are the apple of his eye, but you are also suddenly filled with the desperate desire to please him even more. Your childish point of view starts to give way to an awareness that you don't even have the words to articulate, that there is another life, a selfless life, waiting for you, a world in which Baba is most at home. Even if it's only for a moment, before you quickly even if it's only for a moment, before you rush off to play, you are pierced with the urge to grow up quickly so you can join him there. And when he envelops you in his embrace, for that one brief instance, you can sense what he is already seeing. You walking down a long, dusty road with him, your childhood left far behind.
Amen.